Hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. So, I wanted to discuss this thing about the soul and kind of the misconceptions that there are around it. Because for a very long time, we have went by this narrative that the spiritual existence is really mind-based, or that the mind is sort of the ruling piece of all of it. I believe this is because there have been a lot of sort of mental manipulation around, and there has been a lot of mind controlling on this planet. And so I'm not dismissing the importance of having a deconditioned mind. We tend to have very conditioned and programmed minds. And so therefore, that is not where the soul actually lies. The soul is beyond all of these human pieces, right? We cannot equate our soul to a singular piece of the human puzzle. In the same way, there has also been a bit of a misconception between a spiritual existence and the emotional existence. So a lot of people, usually they are people. I don't doubt that there are beings who are also spreading these kind of narratives in the collective. But this misconception that emotions are the only spiritual existence that there is, or that emotions are the only energy that there is, or that they're the only way to manifest. But the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of layers to our spiritual consciousness, and spiritual energy. It means technically all energy, and everything is energy. So even thinking about this physical body, this is just a lot more dense energy when it comes to it. And I have heard of actually some folks saying that the body is the soul, or the body is the most important thing. But that's not that much true either. And I do hear a lot about, okay, so that the body is just intuitive, these type of things. And that's why people might have this misconception that that's like all that there is to you. But it's really not. We are not our bodies. Again, our bodies are just a vessel for our soul to be in, for spirit to be present in. And so there is a slight difference also, spirit and soul. And soul is technically just your sort of fractal of source within you. And the spirit is just what that is made of. Okay, so spirit is more like an element, right? Because when there is like fire, water, earth, air, then there is spirit. Spirit is the fifth one. So that's kind of so it's the ether sort of ether. I suppose, yeah. It is just the energy, the atmospheric energy that there is. And of course, that can be made of different other energies. And humans have a very big and versatile energy field. And that is, where we can hold all of these, emotional and mental energies, for example. But what my point is, that is not necessarily the same thing as our soul. Like, yes, it is part of our spiritual existence, but any single piece of those is not our soul. We can equate all of those to, a spiritual experience, but one thing on its own is not spiritual existence. Spiritual existence is understanding that there is so much more to what we see with the naked eye. And there is so much more than just the human experience, that is not the only one, but we are in fact spiritual beings. We are souls having a human experience. And in the same way, animals also, have their souls and spiritual experiences. And same with plants and even crystals and mushrooms and all kinds of beings. They have their spiritual experience in that form. And some spiritual beings don't even have a physical body. So so then they are having that spiritual existence as whatever they are going through in that existence, in that lifetime. Yeah, our minds are very conditioned places where we do need to purify our minds and bring it to that higher mind consciousness. and therefore it will deliver. It will have the right discernment, first of all, to deliver the right information and to come to right conclusions. But if there is like a lot of, say, ego clutter in the mind, or if there is a lot of clutter in the mind to begin with, if the mind is not functioning at its highest potential, we might kind of have, first of all, problems discerning, but we might also have the ego kind of get in the way. And so what that, full-blown embodiment allows people to do, it allows us to access the higher mind as well. And when it comes to embodiment itself, this is embodying the multidimensional aspects of you, embodying your soul, and just embodying all that you can be, really. And that can also take a lot of practice if you haven't really cleared all of these conditioned pieces of yourself, if you haven't purified that much of your other levels of consciousness. And there are levels of consciousness anyway, different parts of the way our energy bodies function. And I find that maybe another reason why some of us may have confused the mind with the spirit is because the whole psycho-spiritual side of the spiritual community tends to sort of equate these things to different levels of our mind. So the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind. So these things are psychological terms, and I find that that might be one of the reasons why we have this confusion, because then a lot of these things get sort of equated to the mind, of course. And the thing about psychology, your brain, even though psychology is very sort of abstract, it is very mental, it is even quite emotional, but it's also, I think it's important to realize that our brain is a part of our body. And so if we have had some kind of psychological damage in our brain, let's just say again the example of trauma, which is trapped in the body, but it is also a part of how our brain functions and kind of how we behave. So we need to kind of differentiate all of that from understanding what our soul is and what spirit is. Psychology does have a lot to do with how we develop as well. Like there's so much that psychology overarches, but it's not the same thing as, being psychic or, well, psychic skills, psychic abilities. Yeah, it's not the same thing as our soul path. The role of the personality, okay, because this does get into our psychology as well to some extent. I find that the way our personality forms through the years is also a piece of, sure, yes, a psychological puzzle, but it is also like there is a little bit of an influence from our soul, of course, to what our personality is, unless we totally do not know who we are, unless we totally are off our path completely. And of course, sometimes we might have situations where some extremes are more pronounced than others. And so thus we can appear different than what we might be in a different situation. Even in astrology, in esoteric astrology, our soul will use that personality, that that chart was given in order to fulfill its mission, right? So it will be used as a vessel. Like I said, kind of how I said about the soul using the body as a vessel, the soul is using this personality construct as well as a way to do its work in the world. So it is a piece of the bigger picture, but it is important to also note that our personality is not always that all that equal to the infinite part of who we are, because the soul is our yeah, it's a very deeply intimate part of who we are. And we do access our soul and source from the heart portal, okay, so the heart center. And so that's what I also wanted to mention, because often the misconception between the heart and the emotions is also out there quite a lot. But the heart is just our portal to that love, infinite compassion, infinite pure divine love is the center point of our manifestation as well. And that is because, it is the center of us. right? And of course, there is the hara line as well. That's gonna, the chakras, the hara lines, the meridians are gonna deserve their own video because that's also a very deep conversation that we can go into. But personally, I do consider like our own heart, where we access our soul and our own infinite nature to be where we're at. That's the 0 point of manifestation. Yeah, when it comes to the misconception about the soul being equated to emotions or spiritual existence equated to emotions. Yes, while our emotions do kind of deliver information, different other feedback, and yes, a lot of people have to work on this area specifically, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is all that there is to spirituality. Yes, it is energy in motion, but there is so much more than just emotional energy. Emotions are very sort of flexible, fluctuating things. They are supposed to flow. And so, therefore, when we are not letting them flow, when we are trying to keep ourselves or others in a stagnant emotional experience, that is when we are actually working against like a smooth movement upwards. We are actually preventing ourselves from, first of all, growing, but we're also preventing ourselves from healing. We are preventing ourselves from our evolution of consciousness. We are really preventing ourselves from a lot of things if we try to kind of hold our emotions in this stagnancy. Yeah, we're not supposed to stay in like to like hold our emotions in a container. And so therefore, and when it comes to this aspect and when it comes to this kind of misunderstanding that we need so much emotion in order to manifest or even like manifesting thought forms and stuff like that. That's another thing that is, whenever your mind change, whenever you kind of evolve out of that old way of thinking, old way of being, those things are kind of going to fall apart. And even then, like if you are creating like a thought form, technically you are creating a being, you're creating an entity. You're not necessarily creating an experience, right? So I think it's different to start to think about, manifestations as a more multidimensional thing, right? And more experience based. There's different pieces of the puzzle that come together. And again, like with that emotional piece, like if we're not feeling what we're doing, like it's gonna make the process a lot harder to come through. So we do have to feel things in order for them to, realized. And that's just kind of just some basics on how the spirit really works. But when it comes to, again, with these misconceptions about the soul, going into the sort of third piece, which I've heard about the body, and people kind of say that, okay, the body is very intuitive thing, but the intuition is not the only way our soul speaks to us. There are many levels of consciousness through which the soul speaks to us. The soul speaks to us through our spirit guides. The soul speaks to us to our higher levels, so our higher self, multidimensional self, oversoul, I am presence, those type of things. So there's many kind of levels, many ascended self levels, ascended master self levels, and all kinds of pieces of our higher consciousness that can, speak to us what source is asking from us, what our soul is trying to tell us. And so therefore the body is like the last piece of the puzzle here. The body is, yeah, it's just the vessel. Here's one thing though. Sometimes our bodies are not that smart at all in uh, speaking truth to us. And they are really not telling us what is real. Because the trauma, for example, gets trapped into the body. And we have to, sort of get rid of it. We have to purge a lot of things. And the body is also a very conditioned place to be in. Okay, so a lot of the times, if you're trying to, for example, get out of an old habit, you're going to have to train your body to do the new thing. And there's a lot of training to our bodies really on this path. The body has to be trained to do these things. And I've especially noticed this because as we speak, I'm drinking some decaf. And I'm trying to kind of get out of the habit of drinking so much of it that then like that's all I do, and that's like what I fill my empty spaces with. But I think that's kind of what, I wanted to mention because our bodies are very tied to our habits, and we're carrying a lot of old baggage here anyway. A lot of us are actually. And no matter if it's just our emotions that are, trapped in there, or it's just some old thoughts about what our body is, or even just fat. I mean, honestly, I would be the first person to know that, I gained a lot of weight over the last 6 years or so, and I want to gain muscle. Like that's like my thing. I really want that, but I know I'm gonna have to do something to do that, right? And so I'm kind of trying to work around kind of how I'm eating right now. Kind of trying to do a bit of intermittent fasting, not so like strict because being too strict and even having too much like routine and structure, like I don't mind structure, but then like if it's too strict, if it's too routine, and there isn't any flexibility or any kind of, chill time, then I'm not really gonna do that well with it. So my body doesn't really like that. My body really isn't a big fan of, routine, which is like really weird. But it is what it is. Our bodies get used to a lot of things that we do to them. I find that's one of the big parts of this because we kind of get used to doing certain things for to our bodies, and then we have to retrain them to do new things at times, especially if we are to really complete that deconditioning process and clearing. And I know that for me, it's especially important. But I do look forward to, the snow melting and stuff because that means I get to go on walks. But I do look forward to also going to my gateways because that's like the real juicy stuff happens when I work with my gateway and I just let the visions come through because to me that's very powerful. And if you don't know what a gate worker is, I can make a video about it. Just leave me a comment below. I might end up doing it anyway, but just leave me a comment so that I know that you watched this far and so that I know that, it's an interesting piece of my work. And another part of the body is in this ascension path and spiritual consciousness evolution path. What people often do is a DNA activation. So this is about our DNA, our human DNA, turning from carbon to crystalline. And that is a big piece of what is happening to the body. So it is transforming from that carbon-based uh, body into a crystalline light body. And so we're merging also like a lot of that higher level energy with the physical body, which also leads me to embodiment again on the multidimensional embodiment. So we can embody all kinds of different levels of our consciousness. And in my first recording of this, I went on such a rant about this because I sometimes have come across some cynical people who don't believe that we can uh, embody our higher self or that we can embody our, multidimensional self or whatever. This might not be the channel for you if uh, if you believe in that, like if you're that, cynical about this, because to me everything is possible. I'm an Andromedan starseed, alongside with being an avian starseed. That's like actually avian is one of my sort of most consistent ones. And my Pleiadian self also is, has been up for quite a while. Like especially, it's funny because when I met my sort of human higher self, then I kind of thought, okay, but this guy has like very Pleiadian vibes. And then later on, I realized that, okay, I think actually my human higher self is a mix of a Pleiadian and a human. So we kind of have that going on. And I find that for a lot of us starseeds, that can be the case. And we might be just a lot more in tune with our starseed aspects than our human aspects. And so, yeah, I'm just a very, optimistic person. And I also, I have done embodiment before. And to be honest, though, there have been some times when I kind of had to do more of the clearing again, just do it all over again, because there have been a lot of like things that I've just had to process and a lot of things that I had to heal. Although I am very connected to my multidimensional aspects, when things kind of happen, uh, you might drop in your vibe like temporarily. And I do know that, I can always go back up, because I'm even just right now, I am embodying more of my multidimensional aspects. And I do know that whenever I do this work, whenever I enjoy my work, I do start to embody my higher aspects. It just kind of starts happening. And whenever I do that also, whenever I embody my higher aspects, then I start to also learn a lot about the spiritual sciences without having anyone else to teach me, which, if that isn't powerful, I don't know what is. I don't even need to read a fucking book to learn, but then I kind of might fill in the gaps from those other sources, right? So then if I have kind of wasn't maybe sure about something, or some piece, some link was missing, then I can just reach out, explore. There are so many people who are embodying even their ascended master levels. So it's like, yeah, I have seen it. It is possible. And I have done it also. About the mindset. This can be very easy to confuse. I think mostly because of the coaching. And I'm not gonna bash the coaches. Okay, honestly, I do love my coaches. I absolutely do. I'm not gonna even, pretend otherwise. You all are doing a wonderful job. Most of you anyway. But I did want to say, okay, your higher self is not your six-figure self. It is not like this idealized version of a human of you. It is a part of your divine guidance system and your ascension column. Okay. So the ascension column, this is where you have your access to all of the higher dimensions. It is also a place, where your energy centers become a unified rainbow pillar. So it becomes like this rainbow pillar of light. And it's, I guess some people also call it their channel, because that's where they do, in fact, access the higher dimensions and also connect to the multidimensional earth, and the crystalline realms of the earth. Oh my God, that's so annoying. Put it straight. I can't put it straight because I'm gay. Okay. Uh, yeah, so that's where we access those things, where we can channel, because you can't think your way into your soul. You're really going to have to experience and feel it. And when I say feel it, it's not necessarily emotional feeling, but it's sensation. And it's like that, embodiment, and just feeling how the energy feels. Not necessarily fixating on any emotions. Yeah, just feeling how spirit feels. There's probably a lot of people out there who know, okay, whenever I go into that room, I just feel bleh. It just feels like bleh, because there's that atmospheric spiritual energy there. So in a similar way, whenever you do this embodiment type of thing, you want to embody your higher self, you are going to pay attention to those sort of atmospheric, whether it's bleh or it's whatever it is, that comes from within your soul. Well, our souls can, of course, message about so many things. So if you're like, if you've been like living a life that really isn't true to you, then your soul might be a bit bleh, right? But if you have been living a life that is beautiful, your soul is going to, speak that to you. But this is not a thing that we think our ways through. It's not a thing that we feel ourselves emotionally going into necessarily either, because feeling can also represent like a sensation. Feeling can yeah, it can represent an atmospheric sort of experience as well. While our higher self has access to all of our highest timelines, yeah, that can also be a bit confusing, because, I find that in that sort of space, people might sort of assume that it's just the thing that they want, but it isn't always. Like sometimes our higher selves has sometimes even something better than that, or something that's actually gonna suit our spiritual needs a lot better, and our soul path, right? So therefore, when it comes to that, it is important to get our ego off the way, okay? And this is again where the sort of free will and the fate conversation would need another video for itself, because I do find, yes, we have free will. We absolutely do. There is also a piece of a divine will that is involved, and that's what this has to do with. And of course, there's plenty of parallel timelines also. And we can, of course, we can choose to live in another parallel timeline if we want to. But I find that focusing on the highest one of them all is still a very good choice. And we have free will to do all kinds of things in this world anyway. This is very funny where I had this realization. I was actually in therapy. I was in a therapy session, just a normal therapy situation. Then all of a sudden my hairstyle just fucking drops in, like, dude. And then I kind of, because I started to think about this, like how everything still starts from us, how we are the beginning of our ripple effects. And I started to think about this, like yeah, there's so many weird things that happen in my life that I experience. There's so many weird things that I experience in my life. And yet I understand that at some point I made some kind of a free will choice. I used my free will. I made a choice. I made a fucking choice. And that somehow led into that ripple effect, right? Because when you think about it, let's say something weird happens to me today at the mall, because I'm going to go to the mall. Like at some point, I made the choice to go to the mall. But if I had decided to go to a different mall, that weird thing wouldn't happen at that other mall. Maybe. Of course, it's potential. Like if this was fated, then it would mean that there would be no other mall for me to go to. It would mean that I would really somehow be led into that specific mall because the conditions were just not there for any other mall, right? Or if it was fated, let's say something shitty was going to happen at that mall, but then like maybe my buses are all canceled, or I get sick in the day that I'm supposed to go to that mall. That would be more like a fated divine intervention that's stopping me from whatever shitty thing is going to happen at the mall. So there's like all of these ways that we can think about fatedness and the divine will. There is still free will, and our free will is going to lead us to a lot of, interesting ripple effects. Let's just put it that way, because uh, that really is how a lot of these things work, right? And I do find that when we are really in tune with our higher levels, we're also going to be able to, tap into those, warning signals. So like if something's really off, we're going to feel it and we're going to sense it, and we're going to make a different choice, right? So thank you for listening and watching to this video. It has been my pleasure to debunk some of these myths about the soulful and spiritual existence. I will see you in the next video. Stay cute, stay inspiring, stay awesome. I love you.